Well, good evening once again. Day 120 of the Biden administration. We have a live picture for you tonight of Times Square in a newly reopened New York City. This is what life looks like now, 423 days after it was all shut down because of the pandemic. The city that became the epicenter of the virus now is the latest symbol of the nation's journey toward hopeful and cautious recovery. Even as we get closer to normal, the political battles over the deadly January 6th attack on our Capitol have intensified. Tonight, the House of Representatives passed a bill to create a bipartisan commission to investigate the riot and insurrection. Despite an effort from House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy and his aides to kill it, the vote was 252 to 175, which means 35 Republicans broke ranks with their own leadership, crossed over to join Democrats to vote yes. Just hours before the vote, fresh reminders of the brutality of that day. It came in the form of new videos released by the FBI, which has also announced the arrest of 6 more suspects. Before today's House vote, House members debated the bill, and Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan of Ohio had clearly had enough. He invoked the sacrifice of the police officers who defended the Capitol in calling out the Republicans.
To the other 90% of our friends on the other side of the aisle, holy cow, incoherence. No idea what you're talking about. Benghazi, you guys chased the former Secretary of State all over the country, spent millions of dollars. We have people scaling the Capitol, hitting the Capitol Police with lead pipes across the head, and we can't get bipartisanship. What else has to happen in this country? Cops. This is a slap in the face to every rank and file cop in the United States. If we're going to take on China, if we're going to rebuild the country, if we're going to reverse climate change, we need 2 political parties in this country that are both living in reality, and you ain't one of them.
Congressman John Katko, the Republican who worked with the Democrats to craft the bill, the commission bill in the first place, pleaded with his colleagues to back the investigation.
How can we ensure that the Capitol, members of Congress, and our staffs are secure from attacks? And how do we ensure that this is a safer place for members of the Capitol Police Force who risk their lives every day to protect us? These are only a few of the many questions that need to be answered. The American people and the Capitol Police deserve those answers.
So having passed the House, this bill now goes over to the Senate, where 10 Republicans are needed to cross the aisle to make it a law. Today, their leader, Mitch McConnell, made his opposition official. NBC News reporting he broke the news to colleagues during a meeting where House Minority Leader McCarthy, the other Trump echo, just happened to be a guest. Later, McConnell went to the Senate floor and made the case against a 1-6 commission.
After careful consideration, I've made the decision to oppose the House Democrats' slanted and unbalanced proposal for another commission to study the events of January the 6th. It's not at all clear what new facts or additional investigation yet another commission could actually lay on top of existing efforts by law enforcement and Congress. The facts have come out, and they'll continue to come out.
It was just a few months back, perhaps you were watching us live when we televised the moment, McConnell gave an impassioned speech from that very same place after Trump's second impeachment acquittal. He sounded then as if he would be on board with a special investigative panel.
January 6th was a disgrace. American citizens attacked their own government. There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it.
Meanwhile, Senator John Thune, number 3 Republican in the Senate, noted that his colleagues' reluctance to support this bill may have something to do with the 2022 midterm election.
There are some of our members who I think obviously have an interest in seeing a commission go forward. Others who I think believe it will be counterproductive because of the work that's already been done and that it could be weaponized politically. and drug into next year. Anything that gets us rehashing the 2020 election, I think, is a day lost on being able to draw a contrast between us and the Democrats' very radical left-wing agenda.
Ashley, I'd like to begin with you and your beat. Here is what Congressman McCarthy, Republican leader in the House, said about the reason for his opposition to a 1-6 commission.
What do you say to people who say that you oppose this because you fear about being subpoenaed?
Why would I be involved in any of that in any aspect? It doesn't involve. I have no concern about that, but that's somebody playing politics with it, not wanting to get to the core of what happened.
So, Ashley, in truth, McCarthy knows the answer, and that's the liability of his conversations both on that day and since with one Donald Trump. Isn't it also true that he knows some of his membership has their own issues with exposure to the same type thing?
That's absolutely right. I mean, as we and others have reported, Leader McCarthy was one of the people on that day in those roughly 6 hours from when the Capitol was first breached to when police and other forces helped retake it, who was calling Donald Trump and begging, like many people were doing publicly and privately, for him to do something. There were Republicans, not just Leader McCarthy, but other of his members who were trying to get through to the president, who were calling and begging top White House advisors, the president's children, Jared and Ivanka, saying they were fearing for their lives, which is very different from what we're hearing now, that this was just a typical tourism excursion from some of these rioters in this insurrection that left 5 people dead. And another person who played an interesting role, of course, is Greg Pence, the vice president's brother, who, if there were a commissioner, if there were witnesses called, spent most of the day with his brother, the vice president, whose life was at risk, who was sheltering and hiding in the Capitol, getting spirited away by Secret Service, and in many ways is not just another Republican making a vote against the commission, but would be an eyewitness in the way that Leader McCarthy would, and other members in a way, frankly, they don't want to be.
Lisa Lerer, what is the chance, according to the best of your reporting, that there are 10 Republicans willing to cross the aisle figuratively and vote for this commission in the Senate?
I don't think it's a particularly good chance, especially given what McConnell came out and said, today, that he was against it. I mean, I was really struck by another comment that Senator Thune made. You, of course, quoted him in the intro to this, but he also said that any day that is spent talking about relitigating the 2020 election is the day that Republicans are losing to press sort of a more policy-focused message against the Biden administration and what he called the radical left-wing agenda of the Democrats. And while there are certainly some members, particularly in the Senate, particularly those up for re-election this next year, like Senator Thune, who believe that, there's a whole bunch of other Republicans out in the country, the county party chairs, the activists, who want to do exactly that. They want to relitigate the 2020 election. That's why you see this recount in Arizona. They just want to do it in a way that has very little relationship with the facts. They continue to believe that Joe Biden was not a legitimately elected president. Of course, that's just simply not right. And that is what they see as the major issue, and is one of the major issues motivating the Republican Party base. So that dynamic leaves senators like John Thune, like other elected representatives in Congress, forced in this really tough spot between what they know to be true, because they were witnesses to this attack. They were, as Ashley pointed out, huddling in the House chamber. They were being evacuated out of the Senate and being forced to rewrite history in a way that will satisfy the sort of conspiratorial thinking of their party's base. It's it feels like a politically untenable position.
And Katie Benner, over to your beat. Republicans who vote no on this commission are voting no during a time when DOJ, via the FBI, has this enormous dragnet out, continuing today to get members of the public to turn these accused criminals from 1-6 into them. And an adjacent agency, Homeland Security, has warned us all that this urgent threat of domestic terrorism still hangs over our heads each day.
Yes, and one of the reasons why the threat of domestic terrorism continues to hang over our heads is because it's fueled, according to the intelligence agencies, by misinformation, particularly misinformation about the election and whether or not Joe Biden legitimately won the election. So the idea of the commission actually speaks directly to the growing threat, the mounting threat, the ongoing threat of domestic extremism. We saw in testimony last week former Deputy Attorney General and Acting Attorney General under the Trump administration, Jeff Rosen, testify before Congress that there was no fraud that would have overturned the results of the election, that there was not enough fraud that would have overturned the results of the election. He reaffirmed it once again. We saw Attorney General Merrick Garland. We saw Alan Mayorkas, the head of DHS, also testify that this was a growing threat in large part because of disinformation, misinformation around the election. So you see these things coming together, and they're really closely tied. So the inability for Congress to act and try to come up with a cogent narrative for the public is going to continue to fuel domestic extremism.